afternoon. My name is Sheila Lamb, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. Excuse me. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 26 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one advising services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Managing Third-Party Cyber Risk, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network. Save the date for our next cybersecurity webinar taking place on June 18th, Contracts, Compliance, and Cyber Risk. And I'll drop that registration link into the chat momentarily. We are recording today's presentation and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the expected large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted and the chat feature is turned off. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box and we will adjust them at the end of the session. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your own meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today's session, Kiana Gainey. Kiana is a 20-plus year IT and cybersecurity industry veteran and has served as Chief Executive Officer for SecureTech 360, located in Springfield, Virginia, since its inception in 2010. She is also the Cyber Industry Specialist for the Virginia SBDC. Welcome, Kiana.
Thank you, Sheila, and welcome everyone. We'll just dive right in. So today's topic is really going to be more about, covering the certain cybersecurity risks that are pertinent to small business owners as it relates to third party. I know we use a lot of third party, me being a small business owner as well. We use a lot of third party applications and vendors. And so one of the biggest things that we can do as a small business owner is, understanding the relationships and understanding the vendor relationships responsibility. We'll cover some common cyber threats that may happen when you introduce new risks from under vendors or anything outside of yourself. And then we'll end with some practical steps on how to protect your business and things you can do within your organization to build what I like to call a security first vendor strategy. And then we'll end with some resources and next steps and take some questions. Next slide. So a little bit about myself. I'm also a small business owner, been in the cybersecurity career field and business landscape for about 20 years. But what I'm really excited about is the role here with the Virginia SBDC, where I can help other small businesses navigate these unprecedented times, especially as it relates to cybersecurity. Next slide. So, brief introduction. In today's landscape, we do most of our work life online. And even as a small business owner, we use a lot of different technologies that introduce a lot of different types of security threats. And so navigating, our balancing, I like to call it the balancing act, navigating business requirements and as it relates to cybersecurity and looking at all the rules. And if you're dealing with anything that's in a regulatory body, meaning if you're like maybe a healthcare organization or a government contractor or you do work in the financial sector, there are also those regulatory bodies that you have to think about as well. And so, as we're thinking about over the last few years, cyber threats were in the past were things that we thought only, larger enterprises or organizations should be considering. But over the last couple of years, cyber threats are now targeting micro, which could be, one or two people in your organization. It could just be yourself as a solo entrepreneur, or even small businesses. And they're targeting them because they're looking for things like outdated software, small things that we can put in place to protect ourselves, but they're looking for a window in. And it could be something as simple as wanting, access to information, or I have some retail clients that process credit cards. It could be something as simple as trying to find a backdoor way to get your credit card transaction. So, And the average small business breach cost is over six figures now. And so I know for myself, six figures is a daunting number for a small business that is trying to balance sales and payroll and all the different things that come with navigating that landscape. So one thing as a small business owner is understanding how it relates to protecting yourself within dealing with cybersecurity and staying compliant with those laws. Next slide. So let's talk about some of those cyber threats that are not just prevalent for larger enterprises, but also can definitely be an issue for small businesses. One, ransomware. It could be something as simple as malware that's being trying to be deployed on one of your laptops, even your mobile devices, that will lock you out of your own files. I'll give you a brief scenario. I had a small business owner that did work for a government agency, and they were contract support, and they were authorized to use their devices for some of the processing of some of the work that they were doing for this government client. Well, there we were a victim of a ransomware attack that one of the files that they were trying to access, they got locked out the file. At first, they thought maybe it was something that they couldn't, they forgot the access, the username and password, and then after a deep dive, they realized that there's something more here. And our company was brought in to try to unlock those files, and when we found out that it was as simple as there was some outdated software that was on that device that the hacker used to get on the device and was able to lock the file. And so something as simple as we see, I'll put my two hands up with this. You see the reminders to update your software, and then you're like, I'll do that. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that, in a week or so, just to get it off your screen. And those simple things are things that we can do that are low cost, right? And things that we can put into place and just having a regularly scheduled program to be able to update our software. Small tip, small thing that you can do today that doesn't cost a lot to implement. Another one is phishing. We see them all the time, the fake emails or text messages that will come across your mobile device, your laptops. It looks very similar to something that is from either within your organization. I got one the other day from a person in accounting that works at my company. But when I looked at the body of the email, I noticed that the email address was not one of the email addresses that assigned to my organization. And of course, the email wanted me to do something right now. It wanted me to approve something, and that's not the normal process of what we do in our organization. So immediately I identified that as a phishing attack. But just and I've had certain incidents where I've had employees that, because we regularly talk about common threats in our organization, they're able to identify when it's a fake email. So something as simple as training is very low cost, no cost, something that you can implement in your process and procedures right now can help put in a countermeasure to help with some of these phishing or email attacks. So knowledge is definitely power. Supply chain breaches. Hackers will attack different vendors just to reach you. For instance, I've had one customer of mine who they do a lot of shipping, and so they'll ship through FedEx, and they noticed that some of the packages were not making it to a destination. And when they realized that they were a part of a larger attack against FedEx ended up having to let them know that they were one of the companies that was a part of this breach. And so, because they had a relationship with the FedEx account manager, they had emails set up so that they can get notifications if there were problems with the vendor that they were using. They were able to stay ahead of this. So again, that's another countermeasure that you can put into place by making sure that you have alerts set up if you have third party vendors like a FedEx, or as an example in this scenario, but as another vendor that you're using outside of yourself. Another one is deep fakes or AI scams, very prevalent now. The fake videos or audios having it may look like the person that you may notice with your eyes, but when you think about some of the words that they're saying, or the video may be very not really what they do or their business line. I seen one the other day. It was of a popular actress that I follow, and she was saying some things that I know was not part of her brand. Immediately, I'm like, this doesn't look right. This seems like this is a scam. And so we have to be very careful with the things that we're watching, viewing, or clicking on, because those are very common cybersecurity threats, not just for our small business, but in our everyday life. Next slide. So one other common cybersecurity threat for small businesses is if you are, and I think I covered this earlier, if you are, you do business with regulatory bodies like HIPAA, right, or GLBA, that have reporting deadlines. So making sure that you understand like industry specific requirements as you are taking on new businesses or new business lines, because a lot of times, even within your own organization, if you are not educated on those industry specific requirements, that also becomes a threat to the overall organization. If there are incident reporting deadlines that you have to meet, some may say 72 hours, some may 60 days. So having a security plan, an incident response plan, all these different things in place will be things that you can use as countermeasures to help you navigate what to do in the event that something happens. And then, what you'll find, if you're not compliant with some of these regulatory bodies, you'll have things like fines, lawsuits, and maybe even loss of contracts or businesses. So you definitely have to stay on top of that as you're thinking about, taking on even third party vendors. But even it all starts in house, making sure that you have things in place for your organization, and then making sure that you have um, when you do, if you have contracts with third party vendors, that you're putting in some of these requirements, if they're regulatory bodies that you do represent in your small business, and then making sure that they're very aware of the risks that are associated with not being compliant, and making sure that you have that written out in some type of plan within an agreement between you and that third party organization. Next slide. So why vendor cybersecurity matters. I think we covered that in the beginning, because a lot of times as small business owner, we rely on these vendors, these platforms, these service providers to do things for us on a daily basis. And so making sure that we have things in place to protect ourselves. Cyber criminals often target trusted third parties just to gain access. And I gave you a couple scenarios, even for some of my small business clients, or things that we worked in the past. They'll use things or trusted sources just to try to gain access. And they'll use things like outdated software, or one big thing that I don't think we covered was social engineering. Social engineering is one of a major cyber risk, and it's regardless of the size of your organization. You'll have hackers or cyber criminals trying to penetrate some type of system or a process, by trying to just get someone on the other end to give them either information about the organization, or trying to get access to maybe a network password or different things. So you have to be very careful and make sure that you're training your staff not to give out information. It may sound simple, but you'll be surprised that 80% of a lot of recent attacks, even for larger organizations, started with something as simple as social engineering. One breach can impact your business, your operations, sometimes your customer trust. And so thinking about risk management and putting together a vendor risk management plan is very critical to ensuring that your organization is successful as you're navigating the cybersecurity landscape. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about how you as a small business owner can manage risk. I talked about how you can train your employees and do some internal things within your organization to manage, because you got to start from the inside, and then you work your way out to the outside. So let's talk about how third-party vendors can create risk. So if you're using things like cloud software or different SaaS platforms that you're storing sensitive data, make sure that you read any type of documentation on their website, a lot of things about their policies, their procedures, how they're storing sensitive data, what happens in the event of the emergency, when will you be contacted if there is a breach, and what things they'll be doing for cleanup. This is all very important for you as you're putting together your own vendor risk management plan, but also understanding how it relates to some of the services that you're being provided by that third party as well. If you have IT providers or contractors that may need privileged access, making sure that access, maybe it's not giving them access to everything in your organization, maybe making sure that they have more role-based access or restricted access to just doing the functions that's within their role for your company. And then another big one, even for us when we do site surveys, a lot of times you'll bring in these third-party IT providers or contractors, and you'll give them privileges, but you don't offboard them. So make sure when you're onboarding or you're using someone for a service that once they're no longer need that access, to remove that access as well, especially if it's privileged access. Simple things like weak passwords, making sure that you have strict requirements on what type of passwords to use within your organization, because having those solid security practices definitely will decrease your exposure and decrease your vendors' exposures as well, and making sure that that's also things that you can highlight in your vendor risk management plan as well. And then also make sure you definitely have something written or a process on how you will deal with supply chain attacks, because that is one of the number one attacks that's on the rise, especially if you're dealing with, I gave you an example of one of my clients who use FedEx for some of their shipping. So depending on your business, if you're saying, I don't really deal with supply chain, but if your business requirement or your function has anything to do with supply chain, making sure that you outline those risks in a risk management plan is very pertinent in making sure that you're navigating the cybersecurity landscape as well. Next slide. So a couple of common vendor related cyber threats. Business email, making sure that your business email has all of the security that's needed, making sure that your employees know, to be able to identify things like phishing emails or any emails that um, are not, that's not coming from a trusted source. I mean, that can even be within your organization. Making sure that you have a plan to deal with data breaches, anything from dealing with your payroll. And this is even internal and external. So if you're using, like if you use a third party vendor for payroll or HR, again, making sure you read their privacy policies about how they deal with data breaches as it relates to them running your payroll. If they're, doing HR functions for you, if you have third party payment processors, make sure you understand those policies and procedures, and make sure you implement that into your security plan and your risk management plan within your organization, and how to deal with things like ransomware, phishing attacks, making sure that if you're using managed service providers, even if you're interviewing and you're thinking about which managed service providers that you plan on using, these are questions that you should definitely ask to make sure that you have an understanding on how they'll be able to respond in the event that something happens. Next slide. Again, making sure you review those, vendor security practices before signing any contracts. Make sure you read those privacy policies that maybe sometimes listed on their website, or as you are signing up for their services, make sure you have an understanding of what you're signing up for. Um, Within your organization, if you have the ability, if you can create strong passwords, make sure you have a password policy. But if you can do things like multi-factor authentication, there are a lot of third-party applications that you can use as well. But again, if you're introducing any type of third party, make sure you understand those privacy policies and how it relates to your small business and what you can do to protect yourself as well. Limit vendor access to only what is necessary. I think I covered that earlier. Make sure that your vendor only has access to what they need. Do not get escalated or more privileges than what is needed to do their function or their job for your organization. And then also monitor regularly, though, and review the third party access. Make sure that they're logging in. Make sure that they are, if they are no longer with the organization, that they're taking out whatever access they had prior to when they onboarded to your organization. So onboarding and offboarding is really up there with the social engineering. Making sure you have an onboarding, offboarding policy in place is very crucial to your organization as well. Next slide. So some action steps that you can do just to ensure some of the compliance. And you're probably saying, okay, I've heard risk management plan, I've heard security plan, I've heard vendor management. So how do I put all that into action? How do I get started? Well, we'll have some resources at the end within this slide deck that we'll send out, and I'll send out some additional resources as well. But there are a lot of wonderful organizations like CISA. CISA has great documents or templates that you can use, especially the Cyber Essential page, to help you, one, assess your current security posture, look and see what are we doing now as it relates to cybersecurity, what can we do better, what type of training should I implement for now or even as I'm growing. It'll help you identify any applicable regulations for your sector, close any gaps and think about any type of affordable security solutions. I always like start with things that you can do today, and it could be something as simple as reviewing if you don't have a security policy, creating one, talking to your staff, documenting, training your staff on any compliance policies within your organization or some of those regulatory bodies if your small business has to adhere to those. Review all your contracts that you currently have in place now. See if there are some cybersecurity things that you need to implement in your own environment. And even if there's ways that you can, if you have a customer service rep or someone that you can speak to for some of the third party applications or programs that you're using, to review and see, does this still work for my organization? Do I need to implement other things? Or is this the right type of managed service provider application I should be using at this point in my business? Those type of things that you can look at regularly for your business to make sure that you are staying compliant and also keeping cybersecurity front of mind. Next slide. So, if you have vendors that you're using, make sure you keep an inventory of those vendors. I like to keep an inventory of the vendors, and then a step farther, I have a spreadsheet where I have contact information for the vendor. I'll have like what's the operating hours, if I need help, who I call, making sure you have all of that written down. Also, talk to your vendors about what their breach notification procedures are, and then implement those into your own breach notification procedures. If you have critical data within your organization, make sure you're doing things like backing up that critical data on a regular basis, whenever you deem necessary for your organization, but it's very crucial. So if something happens, and then also not just backing up that data, because I have a lot of organizations that will spend money on backing up data, but then they don't test the backups regularly. So make sure that not only you're backing up your data, but you're also testing those backups to make sure that they're still functional, so that if in the event that something happens, that backup is still sufficient for you to use as well. Number one, regardless of your size, train your employees. If it's just you, I'm a solo entrepreneur, train yourself. You starting today, you came today, so this is your first step in your training. Make sure that they're looking over any type of policies, procedures. If there's invoices, if you're getting vendor requests, make sure that those are legitimate vendor requests. Make sure that the invoices that you're receiving are actual legitimate invoices that you're receiving. I think I received some phishing email the other day that had a notification for me to pay a vendor. And when I looked closely, I noticed that it was the wrong email, wrong amount, and it was from a source during a time of something that I know that I didn't need or no longer had in my organization. So just be careful out there, because they you look at it first and you think maybe this is something, and then when you look a little closer, you realize that this is also another phishing attack. So making sure that you're training yourself regularly on that as well. Next slide. So I think I've covered this earlier about creating a security first culture. And what that means is making sure that you are embedding cybersecurity inside of your business. And it's mostly just a mindset, right? Think about it as a leader, you lead by example, making sure there's continuous education for your employees so they can keep cybersecurity at top of mind. We have a cybersecurity tip of the week. We talk about it in our weekly staff meetings. I also added into my onboarding of all my new employees, even offboarding, because sometimes, depending on what clients that they were supporting, I need to make sure that their access is, deactivated. So making sure that you're just keeping it embedded into your operations, making it a part of your business decisions. A security plan, a cybersecurity plan, a risk management plan should be, updated just like you will update your business plan. As your business grows, as you're introducing new vendors, introducing new employees, you're introducing new risks. So making sure that you update those plans as you are, growing, and as you're, introducing new functionality and things into your environments. Next slide. So some key takeaways. I hope I drove this home. Was preparation is definitely key. Making sure that you implement proactive measures. Doing these regular audits. You can start by just regularly doing an audit on where you're at in your organization, and then keep the momentum up. If you're doing it on a quarterly basis, or at least an annual basis, or sometimes when a significant change occurs, look at what your organization is currently doing and how it's going to change when you introduce a new vendor, or you introducing a new employee, or even if it's a new contractor, if you're bringing them on for a part-time project. Look at your organization, make sure you're doing regular audits to make sure once they're out, or that program or that contractor that you're no longer using, that they offboarded as well. Incident response planning is also key. I think we talked a little bit about that earlier. And I talked about having backups, but then also a part of incident response and being prepared is making sure that you test those backups regularly as well. And just keeping up with all of the latest of the cybersecurity threats as it relates to your small business and how it will impact your small business is also crucial. And then just staying proactive is going to be key to minimizing and safeguarding your business against cyber risk. Next slide. So some final thoughts. As small businesses, I know we don't have massive budgets, but there's things that we can do just to make sure that we, for one, are managing any third-party risks in our organization, make sure that we're managing any internal, external risk to protect our business, our customers as we're growing in the future. Just small things that you can do. It could be as simple as, I think I talked about this earlier, updating your software regularly, doing backups, making sure you have employee training, make sure you're regularly training your employees, making sure that people don't have excessive access or privileges that they don't need, making sure that they're more role-based on what the roles that they're doing as well. Every vendor that we use, contractor, service provider, all a part of our ecosystem, and help us be able to do the work that we do every day for our clients and also for our small business. So making sure that you bring cybersecurity, within your organization, but also extended beyond the walls of your organization is very key to making sure that you protect your business and, keeping and significantly reducing your risk in the future. Next slide. I know we covered a lot in a short period of time, but is there any questions?
Thanks, Kiana. Right now we have one question, so I
Okay.
will ask if there are any other questions that came up in your mind while Kiana was speaking. Please go ahead and drop them into the Q&A box so we can pick her brain live. So the one question we had was, I got a pop-up that an Adobe update was available. How can I know if this is safe?
So a couple of things. did you set up the Adobe to give you regular updates about like updates that you need to do for your system? Is this something that you set up, or was it something that happened automatically? Because if it's something that you never set up and then it just automatically just started happening out the blue, then again, I always say look at what you currently have. And I always look at cybersecurity as if someone came and knocked on my door and said that I had a delivery for something. If I didn't order something, first thing, I'm not opening the door, right? I'm going to have the conversation and say, how can I help you? And if they're saying, oh, I have a delivery for you, and I know that I wasn't expecting a delivery, and maybe they even have on the UPS uniform, but I know that I wasn't expecting anything. One or two things, I'm gonna say, please leave my door, but I'm not gonna open the door, right? So think about cybersecurity in the same type of context. It's the same things that we do in our everyday life. And so if you received a pop-up and it was not something that you had set up yourself, and it's not something, so first thing I would do is I would check the Adobe program itself, open it up, see if you have automatic updates and how the alerts are going to come to you. If that hasn't been checked or set up, then I would not implement that update. Two, if you are on the most up-to-date version of Adobe, and you can also look and see what version it is, always open up another screen and see if that version is even available, or if what will be the impacts of me going to that next version. So if it's not something that I need, I'm not going to do it. If it's not something that is even correct, because that's the nature of the hackers, is that they want you to just go and click blindly. So I said all that to say is that before you just click, make sure you investigate to see that it's something that you definitely need to do before you go ahead. So I think, who is it that says stop, think? I think it's DHS. They have like stop before you stop, think, or something. Click. That type of concept is what I would do in any type of scenario when it relates to just a random pop up coming up my screen.
Great. And that is a question I think a lot of us probably have too. When those pop-ups are there, you want to be safe and you want to do the updates, but you don't want to click on it if you're not
Yes.
sure. So I'm glad that
Yes.
question came up.
That's a great question.
Let's see. Yeah, so then we have another question. Are there any free cybersecurity classes you can take for cyber readiness?
Oh, yes. So you're here today. So this is your first introduction. So welcome. I'll give a shameless plug. We have a lot of wonderful recordings on our website of past webinars, ones that are, let's say you want to do a deeper dive. Like, okay, she's mentioned something about a security plan. She mentioned something about risk management. And there's webinars there that we've done in the past. We have some future webinars, so make sure you stay tuned, and also keep joining our webinars. That could be a part of your cyber education. But here's some wonderful resources as well. CISA is one of my go-tos for anything dealing with small business, but also just as the threat landscape in general. The organization was created just for cyber. And so any like potential threats to the infrastructure, I even set up a Google alert that any new things that are prevalent to the customers that I support and the work that I do, I get alerts for. NIST also has a small business cybersecurity corner that had some great videos, training resources as well. FTC is another one. FTC is really good for insider threat briefings they have up there. If you run into a situation where you have had a breach, it gives some great tips of what to do. My sister actually had an incident that happened for her whole neighborhood. She lives in like a cul-de-sac, and someone got the key to the master key to the mailbox and was taking mail right out of the mailbox, and she just so happened to have lost her ID, and her ID was in the mailbox. And so she called me all frantic, and I was like, okay, let's step through, let's get the checklist, let's contact this person, let's do this, let's do that. And so she was like, oh my God, I can't believe that they have all these resources available. Right. And so she didn't have to spend no extra money. Of course, she had me, but she's like the advocate for a lot of these resources and websites, because sometimes it's just as simple as just having a checklist will help you, because it just kind of say, okay, step one says this, step two says that, who to contact, when to contact. And so just having these resources are great as well. So sorry, I just gave a whole scenario, but I thought that that would be helpful.
Well, it's always good to have Kiana in your back pocket. So right now we don't have any other questions, so I'll put out a last call for questions. I'll go ahead and switch the slides here. And Kiana, I know you've given us great takeaways and last thoughts, but I'm sure you have more. If you could just
Yes.
give us one more. Thanks.
Yes. So, just with anything, I mean, managing third party cyber risk or just like managing any other part of cybersecurity, it's just an extra step. So, whatever you do internally, think about doing the same thing externally. The same things that you will want for yourself as a person that, provides a service to your customer, when you are also going out to use some of these managed service providers, using different applications, things are functionality within your business. Read those privacy policies. Find out, how are you protecting my data? What happens in the event that there's a breach? Who do I contact? What should I do? Right? I sometimes I almost chuckle when I receive like a random um, uh, notice in my mailbox for something, like I think the other day it was something from I would think it was QuickBooks. They sent out, they had this massive data breach, and this is what they were doing. They were offering now free credit, service from anyone that was impacted by this. So the reason why I say it's very important to read those privacy policies, because part of their commitment to you is to give you notification that a breach happened. Right. One, it's not going to come up on the Channel 7 news. So, think about that for yourself, even internally. Will we handle something to our customers in the event that something happened? And two, if we have third parties, how does that correlate with the business functions that we do, and make sure that you integrate that into your operations as well. So I will leave you with that.
That was great. Thank you. And we still don't have any other questions, so I will go ahead and wrap us up. Kiana, thank you as always. And I want to thank everyone who joined us today and ask that you please help us improve our sessions by filling out the short evaluation that you will see when you exit the webinar. You will receive an email with a link to both this recording and to the slides, and with a lot of additional resources that Kiana has put together for us. If you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, please visit virginiasbdc.org/training. This webinar and other SBD resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session by emailing help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. And we hope to see you all at our next session. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.